Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 2 of Modern Sales Pros and Salesforce Lightning Talks. During these 30-minute sessions, we bring in master practitioners from the community and dive in deep to a topic that's super relevant and super interesting to chat about. These sessions are supposed to be really interactive, so please do ask any questions that you have, throw it in the chat panel, use the Q&A panel. And today we're going to be talking about all things data. It's the interconnective tissue of an organization, an important part and parcel of what everyone in RevOps does. And Danielle Marquis has got a real interesting perspective and a bunch of interesting stories about this. But before we jump into the session today, just real quick, thank you all for joining us. We have an amazing event coming up in July, just a little bit more than a month out, where if you enjoy our conversation with Danielle today, you can actually see her again on a panel with a few other master practitioners. We have a Revenue Excellence Summit coming up in July. It's the 13th to the 15th. You can go ahead and join at the link that is in the chat panel. And this 3-day event has a little bit of something for everyone. We're talking about the role of revenue operations and helping bring on more customers more quickly. We have an in-depth conversation about how to compensate your team, how to think and look forward to compensation models in 2021. And our focus is about really helping you transform your organization from being function out to customer in. So go ahead and register with that link that is in the chat panel. But with that, enough about me. Let's learn a little bit more about the star of the show. Danielle Marquis, it's so excited to have you here. Give us the background, give us the story, share please.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Some of my coworkers will make fun of me that I used to like geek out on a lot of this stuff. And they're like, oh, Danielle finally figured something out because she's like jumping up and down. But yeah, so Danielle Marquis, I'm out of the Boston area, out of my home office in East Boston. And I work at Zappi and run our revenue operations function, RevOps at Zappi. And Zappi is a consumer insights company. So we're helping enterprise companies bring new products to life through the innovation cycle, and then ensure that all of their messaging and whatnot that they put through that innovation cycle is really being captivated with the market in their advertising. So really that end-to-end product innovation and getting that consumer insights across the product path. And so revenue operations is supporting our sales teams, our customer success teams, and actually coming into this year, we're really more hands-on supporting any of the teams that are in customer facing or customer data capturing roles. So delivery operations and our support operations are things that we're going to start taking a lot more on. So a lot of it is driven by systems and data, which is what's going to be exciting to jump into today.
I love it, Danielle. This is so exciting, and this is such a good conversation. Let's just jump right into it. And folks, just as a reminder, I know a bunch of people have joined in here. We're going to be chatting, Danielle and I. We've got a couple topics that we're going to talk about. Please do put your questions or comments in the chat panel. And as a reminder, this is just a 30-minute session. This is a lightning talk. It's a cup of coffee with some of our greatest people in the community. So we're going to get through as much as we can. And if you need more, we've got Danielle joining us again in July at the Revenue Excellence Summit. So Danielle, you ready to jump into it?
Let's do it.
Well, we're talking all things data today. So really, when you think about the revenue operations role, it feels like data and revenue ops kind of go hand in hand. Why is that the case? Why is it so important in the RevOps world?
Yeah, I think what I see as important in the RevOps role is that RevOps is it's the atom of any decision we're making across that customer journey process, sales process into customer success. So data is the core of what helps us understand what's good, what's bad, what do we scale, what do we pull back on. It helps us run, depending on what area we're looking to grow into, maybe we're running experiments. Data is the core atom that tells us if that experiment is worth actually going forward with, or, hey, maybe we should come back to the drawing board. So, and in the RevOps world, we're really responsible for a lot of the creation of that data. How do you ingest that? How do you make it actionable? We're really helping be kind of like that highway traffic of like how our customers are actually going to use it.
Well, and with that, I think it's really interesting, right? We've got, I think, more systems than ever before generating data. Like what happened? The CRM used to be enough, and now we've got, I mean, I think it's Dooley and Scratchpad are each raising hundreds of millions of dollars just to help get data into the CRM. Like where did we break down? Like where did this happen?
Yeah, so I, being in this game for a little bit, seeing how, basic, even if you look at the Salesforce sales process, right? Like you had your basic funnel along that, and you're starting to get hungry. It's data. The more intelligent you get with data, the hungrier you get to see what else, right? It's like that rabbit hole of data. And I honestly think that's where a lot of these additional tool sets came out, right? Like, great, I have great notes in this section, but what if we want to capture notes over here for this opportunity? Or, oh, I have this win-loss data, but it doesn't tell me enough about what happened throughout the sales process conversation. You see the gongs pop up or chorus, right? Because now you're like, okay, what are what are those keywords driving the sales process? Not just what are the right stage ages, right? Like if you think about the progression of data, a sales ops or RevOps now evolving into more of that sales marketing ops, those core data points almost opened up that can of worms for like, where else could we be driving this from? And how do we know this MQL not just had an acceleration point of 30 days to SQL, but here's the exact data points that went into it. And I think the more data we started capturing, it's a big data problem, right? Like you get hungrier, and then it's how do you actually digest it? Now that we have all this data in all these different systems, then you have the problem of digesting and actually telling a story across disparate. So
it feels like that's too. That's as RevOps has evolved from sort of Salesforce administration to sales ops to RevOps. I feel like an important part of getting a seat at the table is transforming data into insights, right?
For sure. That's been progression of my career. I've been a little bit of all the little ops that I think we hear coming into RevOps. And what's really interesting is the more mature I think even I become and can speak with my, leadership team about where I think the biggest impact for my team could sit based on all the other teams at Zappy per se is very different from what I was doing when I was at Carbonite. So at Carbonite, we didn't have a sales or marketing ops function at all. So it was starting to build some of that clout of like, okay, we don't really know what's happening with our sales team right now. Let's start learning there. And then it was understanding, okay, we've fixed some of this lead problem, but now we have, nurturing an inbound problem. So like we have the reps understanding what to do with the inbound, but we don't have enough inbound coming in and we don't have anyone really focused on those programs. So how do we start to build back that funnel data and understand like when we're forecasting these sales numbers, what is important for the marketing team to be really bought in and aligned around? And now you've seen a lot of that move away from like sales and marketing ops to that revenue ops alignment function. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, right? We've got all these disparate systems. We've got all these data silos. What have you done to help break down some of those silos or prevent them before they happen?
Yeah. So some of the things that we put in, I'll say one, it's not really a data, I guess, silo per se, but like a tool I bring with me in my toolkit everywhere I go is Lean Data. I think that's one that helps when you're starting to integrate your marketing automation or your other inbound drift, all your other inbound areas into your Salesforce. We're in such a, we're in your CRM, but we're in such a space now, right? That a lot of us are moving to that account-based, right? So understanding that all of these inbound leads need to associate to now these target accounts. Lean Data is like a tool that I've just always brought with me to help drive that and be a little middleware for Salesforce and your external inbounds. And then the other thing we're doing is really working and getting clear on like, what do we push into Tableau for our business decision-making dashboards versus what do we really try to make actionable through either Salesforce dashboards or we're actually using this year Troop. So pushing the right data out at the right time so that it's not just a big noisy dashboard that a rep's looking at and trying to decide out of these 20 components, which one should I be focused on right now? If you hide your little overdue ops at the bottom of that dashboard, no wonder why they're probably not cleaning up their overdue ops, right? So just really trying to pull that all together. And when we look at bringing in new systems, because in this ecosystem, it's kind of impossible not to bring in some partners, right? And when you're bringing in those partners, really thinking through, am I integrating these into a process, or am I, putting yourself in the end user's shoes? So like something like Groove, I really love, because I can use as a sales rep in my Gmail or Salesforce all of the same components of Groove, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Salesforce, Gmail, and HighSpot, and feel like I'm doing an outbound email. Sounds like a lot, but it consolidates that all together. So thinking through more of like, what is the process and data we're trying to drive versus specific tool sets, I'd say.
No, I think that's a great point too. And oftentimes you see folks approach this from a, I need these tools standpoint, but they don't actually think about the process and the interconnection. We've got a question coming in here from the Q&A panel from Nash around setting up permissions in Salesforce, right? You've got all different kinds of roles and hierarchies and all of that. Everybody needs their tools. How do you think about setting up permission hierarchy in Salesforce?
It's a great question. I'm probably, I've always been of, as long as you're not in an industry where that's hyper secure, right? Like there's industries where you really need to lock down the account team, or that region can just see their stuff. I've actually been in a big mindset of like, transparency is king, especially if you have someone who's working Starbucks in the US and Starbucks in the UK. I want them to actually be able to kind of have some of that knowledge share and not necessarily lock down. But I think when you need to think about permissions for this, it's really understanding to that point, like what is this, what's the priority to keep your data secure? So if your data is something where like we share everything across the company, so like we actually don't have a ton of permissions locking things down. And then also thinking through, I guess, on a data capture point, maybe needing more clarification there. But if we're talking about permissions on actual fields or layouts or whatnot, it's really about understanding what you actually need someone to input versus what you can feed to that end user. And when I say that, if there's data points you can get to them without having to have them input, or if they're changing it, it changes your core business reporting, you probably want to be locking those down a little bit more.
And I think great context there, Danielle. I think another thing to approach this with is like really back to what Danielle was saying of thinking through who's using what tools and why, having a really clear understanding of who's in the CRM and why. Because I think, Danielle, let me know if you disagree with this, but I feel like we're on the same page. If we could keep sellers completely out of any system and just have them selling 100% of the time, I think we would, if we could wave a magic wand. So I think that there's a lot of design that you can do there when you think about both permissions hierarchy and who can do what and all of that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that one.
Yeah, I think I've tried to explain that to folks before. Like Salesforce is not a tool that helps sellers do anything. The data in Salesforce helps them start to do some interesting things. Interesting, actually, two double barrel here from Kate O'Brien. But Danielle, let's start actually with the second question from Kate. What do you do organizationally about win-loss analysis for your leadership?
Great question. I think across any sales team I've been a part of, or customer success, it is a little bit like pulling teeth. So a sales rep doesn't want to hit loss, right? That's like a big morale crusher to be like, crap, I lost this opportunity, right? So it's actually flipping it on its head. So when I do any type of pipeline training, or opportunity playbook has a whole section on this, but flipping it on its head and just really enabling them to understand like lost is still good, because lost is something we share with our go-to-market team, our product team, our leadership team, our internal market research team, to say like, hey, these types of things we're losing to competitors, what's going on here? So like lost data is actually really powerful. And the way we broke it down, so that was definitely one of the first things I refreshed when I got into the Zappy org. And it's something I typically look at when lost data is working with, if you're going to say like, hey, the product team's going to consume this, they have to be bought in to consume it. Like you can't, the biggest thing you could say to a sales rep that's going to hurt your integrity on the RevOps or data capture side is like, these people need to use this data and then no one uses it. So getting product bought into the fact that like, this is powerful data coming back to them, or the different teams you might be sharing that with, and then working with them on like, if it's feature functionality, what are the core feature functionality common requests we get, right? So like helping guide in a wizard of a lost, like I always have a general lost answer and then use dependent fields for understanding like, if it's lost to competitor, I'm going to ask for your competitor. I'm going to ask why it lost to competitor. And that way it's walking them through a wizard so that you're capturing a more streamlined answer around loss, and then always having a little text box to explain the context. Win analysis is interesting because I think in my past, I've relied more heavily on like using the data like a stage before winning, or age, your kind of average sales ops metrics. Whereas, we actually looked into getting a little bit more extensive on our win data. And I think what's helped us honestly a little bit, and it's not in a systematic per se approach just yet, but we have a channel called Zappy Wins, and big deals get pushed into there. Big deal alerts, even if it's an email, great way to like swarm around something positive happening. And then typically like that rep will pull in the rest of the account team and explain a little bit what happened, or we can add a gong call into that or whatnot. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, the loss is probably the thing that's always the trickier piece to get someone to actually fill out.
Yeah, and I think another thought on this too is the cadence and how frequently, back to the kind of the earlier part of case, it's going to depend a lot on the volume and the velocity of the business. When I was running a sales team, we had a 9 to 18 month sales cycle. So we didn't have a lot of opportunities. So we would run, anytime we lost a deal, there would be a thorough conversation, because that was the nature of business. If we were flipping grilled cheese and selling, $2,000 products on one call, the data matters as much, if not more, than the frequency with which you're doing it, how you work in there. So Kate, the short answer, you got a lot of great context from Danielle, but I think that the industry standard piece is it depends a little bit on the sales cycle and the cadence that your product team is on, that they can actually do something with it that your leadership team wants to hear about it. So let's keep going here, because I want to talk a little bit more. We touched on the data silos before, and we've started to hit on a couple of different topics around taxonomy. And I think this is an interesting one, right? We've created, the big data was supposed to save us, and now we're hiring people to just manage the taxonomy of the data. Like, how do you approach taxonomy, especially as you're bringing in new tools and new people and all of that?
Yeah. We just hired a data specialist, data hygiene hire. Honestly, we were trying to, between BI, marketing, and my team, trying to pick it up, right, as you go. And that's never a good approach. Like, especially as you're scaling fast, it's always this, I talk about in the 80-20, right? You get 80% of the way there, and then the next project comes in, or the next fire drill comes in, and like, it just kind of dies. And so like, you kind of got there, but you didn't go over the finish line, right? The biggest thing, like if I could go back, I love learning through failure. I have had plenty of them, and I think it's the best teacher as long as you can sit back and reflect on like how you could have done that better, what went wrong, when did it go wrong, and where. Something like taxonomy, I feel like, is something we just deprioritize. Whereas I would actually argue we need to start, again, flip the script on taxonomy and make it more of the star of the show. Because once you start scaling fast, it's going to be very hard to go back and catch up. So like, if you're starting up an org or getting into a new org as a new hire, like that's the best time, flip up a Google sheet or whatever you like to work in, and just start making a data Bible. And don't just put the field name and what it does, but like really think through, like, how are we using this? Does it have longevity? Like, you can go back and use that. I guess field trip's a great way to start that Bible, right? So running a field trip, you can go to App Exchange, pop it in, run it on your objects, and then you can come back and say, like, it's a great way to evaluate, like, what do we not need anymore? Because like someone like me comes in an org after someone else has been playing around in there, right? You have a lot of tech debt. You're kind of like, who uses this field? Why do they use this field? And then the last piece is like, at the end of the day, we're all smart people. We live and die in these systems, right? What's intuitive to us is not always intuitive to your end users. So really gut checking that with a couple end users. Something very simple I run into constantly this year is we have a lead source detail for someone who registers for the Zappy product. And we call it Zappy Store Signup. And then if someone in your account invites you, we have a Zappy Store Signup invitation. About once a month, I have one of the sales managers taking inbounds ask me what the heck Zappy signup means. And it's, to me, a Zappy signup means I was like, how do I answer this without using the same words in the definition? They signed up for Zappy, but if you break it down, they're like, well, we didn't know if that was a webinar or an event that they signed up for versus something as simple as switching sign up for registration or some user registration on platform, I know that's a long word, but thinking through where that confusion. But I think that's a big thing with taxonomy is start your Bible early on and maintain it, prioritize it. Whether it's a monthly or quarterly, just due diligence check. Something like we're working with a consultant now and we had to go rebuild it, right? It sucks. It's a lot of extra work you don't want to be doing further down.
It's one of those things too, back to the point of scaling, it forces you to probably do a few things, right? First, it makes it easy to at least share it and say, hey, here's the bad taxonomy that we use, but at least it exists. But the second part is too, I imagine there's some reflection of do we really need this? Hold on, as you're writing the taxonomy, which is a massively tedious task, it forces you to be like, is this actually worth it? What the heck are we getting from it?
Yeah, I literally just spent my first hour today doing that on our product taxonomy. It's 4 different admins.
Perfect warm up for a conversation on data.
Four different admins have touched the product table in Salesforce. So, you have some admins that don't understand you can actually adjust a label on a standard field. So they just go and create a new custom field, even though it fits into product family. We just call it pillar at Zappy. So they just created a pillar field. So now it's okay, what's those fun decisions of is it duplicated? Is there a purpose for both? The other thing that not just the Bible, but and my Salesforce admin will tell you I am the worst at this, is put a description on your fields when you're creating them. So if you're the people in charge of creating fields in any of your systems and they have a place to put a description, put it there. Because if you've come into systems, you know how hard it is to exactly do that kind of what the heck is this random field trying to capture? And if you're really great, putting because the where it's used button is helpful, a lot more helpful than when it wasn't there. But there's a lot in when you get into reporting. If you have custom report types and all these other areas where they're relying on some of these fields, but you're not making it very clear how important that field might be, or how integrated that field might be. Those are certain areas you can put in that description, and any other admin coming in can have a quick insight to how impactful will it be? Those classic questions hey, if I remove this field, what am I breaking?
What breaks? Well, we don't know. We'll find out when we remove it, and then you get a call, and it's oh no, we should have done that. You touched on this a little bit, but I think the last piece, we'd be remiss if we talked about data and taxonomy, and we didn't talk about actually getting people to put the stuff in the system, right? How do you strike the right balance between getting reps to get data into and SDRs to get data into Salesforce and not having Salesforce be a tangled web of spaghetti of just, oh no, that lookup field looks at this thing, and now that's why you can't add notes to the opportunity because you didn't fill this thing out. How do you balance those two maybe competing interests or interests that are sometimes in tension?
Yeah, I think the biggest rule of thumb is pushing back and just asking what they're trying to show. So especially in a scaling org, you're going to have everyone and their mother coming in hey, can we put a field into Salesforce to capture this? Hey, can we put a field into Salesforce to capture this? It's just a checkbox. It's a really quick one. Those compound. So it's helping educate hey, what are you starting with what are you trying to get to? Is it a new process? Are you trying to capture, a certain trend line? So what are you actually trying to answer? What question are you trying to answer? Because a lot of times you probably have some data in there you could repurpose to answer those questions, or just reformat to get to a good answer, or say, hey, you're right, that's actually something we should be capturing and we're not. What, you know, here's the best place to maybe get it in. And it's also helping educate back, like, I understand it's just a checkbox, right? I do this a lot with our internal developer team who works with our quote builder, right? Like, it, you know, to them, it's like, it's just one little manual thing they have to do. And I'm like, but that one manual thing is compounded on the other 5 manual things over the last 6 months. So now it's 6 manual steps, and the, you know, so helping educate the internal partners and customers you're working with on like what the true process looks like or needs to look like to answer the questions they're trying to get to. Because a lot of times once you ask them, what are you trying to answer? They actually go back and say, oh, you're right, maybe I need to take this back and refine it a little bit. That's typically what happens. Like, oh, actually, I just had this idea, and really that wouldn't answer what I needed to answer.
Yeah, I think that it's an important part too, when we back to what we were saying before, of becoming more of a strategic business partner and not just an order taker. Like, that one question is powerful. And what, Danielle, what you bring to the table when your approach to revenue operations in this regard is all like product manager in a lot of ways, right? You mentioned we got to think about the people actually doing it. We've got to make it easy for them to put the data in there. We have to challenge when the apple cart's going to get disrupted. And I think that's a pretty slick way to think about getting people to put stuff into Salesforce, because otherwise you get the old, well, if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool. That was cool. That worked 15 years ago. So one last question for you here before we move to wrap. And folks, we've only got a couple minutes left. So if you got anything hot and burning, put it in the Q&A panel. We'll see if we can get to it. Kate O'Brien, this is back to when you were talking about kind of lead routing and all of that. They've just got a sales team. How do you recommend folks balance between kind of ABM activities and inbound activities? Like, what's
that's a great question. We went through it. So we went all in on, we're going ABM. So I'm not like, we're all in ABM. We spent the last year understanding what works for us and not. And part of that is how much can you balance? I'm going to answer with it's the art and science a little bit. Understanding how their activity metrics are looking. So like, what does the sales process look like? How much inbound are you getting? Looking at a lot of those leading indicator or additive metrics, right, will help you understand how much bandwidth for outbound you might have. If you don't have a BDR team and you have a massive inbound funnel, you're not going to necessarily have the right bandwidth to put the due diligence into outbound prospecting that a target account list might need. Because when you're doing more of that outbound, especially, I don't know how mature the ABM program might look, but you may not have the marketing support to nurture that. So it's a very cold approach, and it means that you're getting more customized with who you talk to, how much time you're spending prospecting, right? Inbound's pretty like putting it on a platter in front of you and saying, okay, like really shouldn't mess this one up unless it's just a crappy quality. But you know, but like if you have a high volume inbound, you're probably not going to be able to handle a very high or potentially not an outbound really customized program. If you have like an ABM specialist that you're working with, so like we don't have BDRs, but we just hired our first ABM specialist who's going to be like our new age version of a BDR. So she's helping them with warming campaigns for our ICP verticals. And she's doing a lot of that heavy lifting and trying to drive engagement so that their outbounding efforts aren't 100% there necessarily. Like I can only focus on these 15 because it takes so much time to do my homework and find all my contacts and map the accounts out and do all that work. So depends on how much support you have for their outbound effort too.
It's a very big undertaking, and I'll check to, you know, folks, if you want to dive in more here, we've actually got a full session with Sales Loft's SVP of Demand Gen, where he talks about how to actually allocate like time and resources and tools and all of that. It goes super in depth on this concept because it's a complex question, to Danielle's point. There's a lot of art to it, and there's a fair amount of science too, where like you can only handle so many calls in a day, take so many demos in a day, advance so many opportunities at any given point in time.
Yeah, we actually, just really quick, I know we're like at time, but something we did do to try to learn a little bit about that outbound and put some corrals on it was say, like, you can have 30 outbound at a time as an acquisition rep. And we don't have a ton of inbound. So like that was a very manageable number. And we also put a 30, 60, 90-day rule on it. So if you didn't reach out to that account you grabbed within 30 days, we took it away. Yeah. If you were reaching out to it and you didn't get any type of engagement back, like no response on emails, phone calls, meetings set up in 60 days, it went back to the queue. If you didn't get a meeting set or pipeline set within 90 days, we went back to the queue, because at that point, that's not something that's a viable effort for your bandwidth. And we should be putting something that could be a better focus on your plate. That's a way to approach it in the meantime.
Good way to use the data to bring it home. Danielle, we're at time. That went by like really quick. I feel like we just started talking. But folks, if you want to see Danielle again, she's going to be joining us later on, actually this week, and again in July. So stay tuned for more from her. Danielle, thank you so much for being our guest on episode 2 of the Rise of RevOps Lightning Talks. I know you're super busy, and it matters a ton to get your perspective. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Danielle, take it easy, stay safe, and everybody, we'll talk to you soon.